The Astralis training complex looked like someone had taken a military base and a crystalline cathedral, thrown them in a blender, and poured the result across 3 square kilometers of artificial terrain. Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood at the entrance, duffel bag in hand, wondering what the hell he'd volunteered for. "First time at joint species training?" asked a voice beside him. A fellow human officer, Captain Sarah Chen, looked equally overwhelmed. "First time working with Terk at all," Jake admitted. "You?" "I did a brief liaison rotation, but that was diplomatic stuff. Nothing like this." She gestured at the complex ahead. "Full tactical integration. We're supposed to learn to fight alongside them, using their methods and ours interchangeably. Think we'll survive it?" "The Terk have the most sophisticated tactical systems in known space. If we can actually learn from them, we'll be the most dangerous soldiers humanity's ever produced." Chen smiled without humor. "If we can't, we'll probably just embarrass ourselves in front of beings who have been perfecting warfare since before Earth had multicellular life." "That's encouraging." They checked in at the main facility, where a Terk administrator processed their credentials with efficiency that felt almost dismissive. The Terk were tall, averaging 2.5 meters, with 4 arms and segmented armor plating that covered their bodies like organic technology. Their skin was a deep blue-gray that seemed to absorb light, but the armor plating was what caught Jake's attention. It glowed. Subtle patterns of bioluminescence rippled across the plates in colors ranging from pale blue to deep amber, shifting and pulsing in rhythms that seemed almost musical. "The armor displays are their primary communication during combat," Chen explained, noticing his stare. "Verbal language is too slow for tactical situations. They developed a visual system instead: patterns, colors, pulse frequencies. It's like a whole language written in light." "Can other species read it?" "Some. The Kethrin have partial comprehension after decades of study. The Valkyrin can recognize basic status signals. Humans," she shrugged, "we're still working on hello and don't shoot." Their quarters were functional, but clearly designed for beings with different proportions. Jake spent 10 minutes figuring out how to adjust the sleeping platform to something his spine wouldn't hate, then reported to the training field for orientation. 50 humans stood in formation alongside roughly 30 Terk warriors. The size difference was immediately apparent. Humans looked like children next to their armored counterparts. But what really struck Jake was the constant light show. Every Terk's armor displayed shifting patterns, and when they moved, the patterns moved with them, creating a mesmerizing cascade of color and motion. "Attention!" barked a voice that resonated with harmonic overtones. The speaker was clearly the senior instructor. Her armor was more elaborate, and the patterns displayed across it were complex enough to make Jake's eyes hurt trying to follow them. "I am Battle Instructor Vera. For the next 16 weeks, you will train according to Terk tactical doctrine. You will learn movement, formation, threat assessment, and coordinated assault using methods my people have refined over millennia." She paced before them, and Jake noticed her armor patterns shifted with each step, flowing colors that seemed to echo her movements before she made them. "This training will be difficult. Many species fail to adapt to our systems. Those who succeed become valuable assets to the Alliance. Those who fail—" She paused. "At least learn humility." The Terk instructors chittered, their version of laughter. Training began immediately. Basic formations first, movements that looked simple but required perfect synchronization. The Terk moved like water, flowing from one position to another with such fluid precision that Jake couldn't see where one movement ended and the next began. Humans were significantly less graceful. "No, no, no," Vera's voice cut through the chaos. "You are thinking about each step. You must feel the formation. Anticipate your squadmates' movement before they make it. React to intention, not action." "How are we supposed to know their intention?" Jake muttered to Chen. "Watch their patterns," Vera said, appearing beside him with speed that made him jump. "The armor displays intention before movement." Learn to read them. Jake looked at the Terk warrior beside him. The armor plating along the spine and hips showed shifting blues and greens, pulsing in what might have been a rhythm or might have been random noise. He had no idea what any of it meant. The formation exercise continued. Jake tried to anticipate movements based on normal human cues, weight shifts, muscle tension, eye direction. It sort of worked with other humans but was completely useless with Terk. Their movements didn't telegraph the way human movements did, but their armor did something. He noticed Vera's lower plating, the sections along her hips and lower spine, seemed to pulse just before she changed direction. Not a conscious observation, just a pattern his brain registered peripherally. He found himself watching those plates, trying to correlate the light patterns with her movements. Blue pulse meant forward motion. Amber shift meant lateral. The green ripple that preceded her turns. Again, Vera commanded, and the formation reset. This time, Jake watched her lower armor plating more deliberately. The patterns were consistent, specific colors and rhythms corresponding to specific movements. He started anticipating her shifts, adjusting his position fractionally before she actually moved. It worked. He stayed in formation better, his movements more fluid, less reactive. "Better, Lieutenant Morrison," Vera called. "You are beginning to feel the flow." Jake felt a small surge of pride. He wasn't just flailing anymore. He was actually learning to work with Terk movement patterns. The training continued for 2 hours. Jake kept watching Vera's armor, particularly the lower plating where the patterns seemed clearest. He noticed other things too. How the colors intensified before major directional changes, how the pulse frequency increased during complex maneuvers, how certain patterns seemed to ripple from her hips up her spine when she was about to call a formation shift. He was so focused on reading those patterns that he didn't notice Vera had stopped moving until he nearly walked into her. She turned to face him, and the entire training field went quiet. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Why do you keep looking at my butt?" Jake's brain short-circuited. Every human on the field turned to stare at him. Several Terk instructors stopped what they were doing. Chen made a sound like a dying animal. What?" Jake managed. "You have been staring at my lower armor plating for the past hour, specifically my hip and pelvic sections." Vera's voice wasn't angry, but it was loud enough that everyone could hear. "This is the 3rd time this session, so I ask again, why do you keep looking at my butt, human?" Jake felt heat creeping up his neck. "I wasn't. I mean, I was watching the patterns. The armor displays. They seem to show your movements before you make them, so I was trying to." He stopped because Vera was making a sound. A chittering, clicking noise that grew louder and more complex. Her armor blazed with colors Jake had never seen before, rippling patterns that seemed to cascade across her entire body. She was laughing. The other Terk instructors joined in, their armor displays going wild with what Jake now recognized as amusement. "He was reading your patterns," one of them said, his armor shifting to colors that might have meant surprise. "The human was actually reading your tactical displays." Vera's laughter subsided into quieter chittering. She stepped closer to Jake, and he fought the urge to step back. "You were watching my hip plating to predict my movements." "Yes," Jake said, unsure if this was still a problem. "The patterns shift before you move, so I thought if I could correlate the colors and pulses with specific movements, I could anticipate the formation changes and—" He stopped, realizing he might be digging himself deeper. "Did I do something wrong?" "Wrong?" Vera's armor shifted to what might have been amazement. "Lieutenant Morrison, you were unconsciously reading Terk tactical language. Do you understand what that means?" "That I was staring at your armor inappropriately. It means you have been processing combat communication that most species cannot decode even with years of formal study. The patterns displayed on our hip and spinal plating are primary tactical indicators. They show movement intention, threat assessment, and command signals in real time." She gestured at the other Terk. Our allies can recognize basic status markers after extensive training, but you were tracking predictive movement patterns instinctively, using them to coordinate your own actions without conscious translation. Jake's brain struggled to process this. I was just watching the lights and trying to figure out what they meant. Yes, that is the point. Vera's armor settled into colors that seemed almost warm. Most beings see our displays and recognize that they carry information, but their brains cannot process the data quickly enough to use it tactically. You were not just recognizing information, you were using it, adapting to it, predicting from it. So I'm not in trouble. Trouble? No, Lieutenant Morrison, you are fascinating. She turned to address the other Terk instructors. We should test this, properly. Agreed, said one of the senior instructors, armor flashing with what might have been approval. If the human can actually read tactical patterns without formal training, that changes our assessment of human adaptability significantly. Jake stood there feeling like he'd just stepped into something much larger than a simple training exercise. Around him, humans were staring with expressions ranging from amusement to disbelief. Chen looked like she couldn't decide whether to congratulate him or back away slowly. Vera focused on him again. Lieutenant Morrison, I am offering you personal mentorship. I will teach you to consciously understand what you have been perceiving subconsciously. In exchange, you will help us understand how human pattern recognition differs from our assumptions. She paused. Unless you would prefer to continue embarrassing yourself by staring at instructor armor without comprehension. No, I'd be honored to accept mentorship. Jake felt his face burning. And I'm sorry about the staring. I didn't mean to be inappropriate. You were not inappropriate. You were learning. Vera's armor shifted to softer colors. Though in the future, perhaps announce that you are studying tactical patterns rather than letting your squad mates assume you have developed unusual fixations on Terk anatomy. The chittering laughter returned, and this time Jake managed a weak smile. What had started as the most embarrassing moment of his military career might have just turned into the most important opportunity, assuming he survived the mortification. Personal training with Vera began the next day in a smaller facility designed for detailed tactical instruction. The walls were lined with displays showing historical Terk battles, each one a cascade of shifting light patterns that made Jake dizzy if he looked too long. Sit, Vera commanded, gesturing to a floor mat. She settled across from him, her forearms folding in a posture that seemed relaxed. First lesson, understanding what you are actually seeing. The armor patterns. Yes, but more specifically, you are seeing a language, not metaphorically. Literally a visual language with grammar, syntax, and context-dependent meanings. She shifted her lower armor through a sequence of colors. What did you just see? A blue shifting to amber, then a green pulse. Describe it more precisely. Speed, intensity, direction of the shift. Jake concentrated. The blue started at your left hip, moved across to the right over maybe half a second. The amber was brighter, concentrated in the center. The green pulse radiated from your spine outward. Good. That sequence means forward advance with lateral awareness of right side threat. Maintain formation cohesion. Every part carries meaning. Color indicates action type. Direction shows spatial reference. Speed suggests urgency. Intensity marks priority. She ran through the sequence again, slower. This is basic tactical instruction. You were reading these yesterday during formation training. I was. Yes. When I displayed this pattern, you moved forward while maintaining awareness of the right flank and staying in formation. You did not consciously understand, but your brain processed the instruction and your body responded. Jake's mind reeled. How is that possible? I don't know your language. You do not know our verbal language. But your brain is processing our visual language at a subconscious level, the same way you process human body language without conscious thought. Vera's armor shifted to contemplative colors. The question is whether we can bring that processing to conscious awareness. whether you can learn to deliberately read what you currently perceive instinctively. Over the next 2 hours, Vera walked him through basic tactical patterns, threat assessment markers, reds and oranges that indicated danger levels and directions, status indicators, greens and blues showing readiness and positioning, command signals, complex multicolor sequences that conveyed tactical instructions. Jake's head hurt from the concentration, but something was clicking. Patterns that had seemed random yesterday now carried obvious meaning. He started seeing the grammar Vera described, how colors combined, how pulse rhythms modified meaning, how the position of displays on armor anatomy created spatial reference. "You are learning very quickly," Vera observed. "Most species require weeks to distinguish basic threat markers. You are already processing command sequences. It's like learning to read, but visual instead of written. Once you understand that specific combinations mean specific things, the rest starts making sense." Jake frowned at a particularly complex pattern Vera displayed, though some of these are still completely opaque to me. "That one is advanced tactical coordination involving multiple squad elements. You should not be able to read it yet." She shifted the pattern slightly. "But you are tracking parts of it. Your eyes follow the primary command elements, even though you cannot consciously parse them. Is that normal?" "No. You are processing significantly faster than our training models predict for alien species." Vera leaned forward, her armor shifting to colors Jake was learning meant curiosity. "I have a theory about why." "Okay. Humans evolved as persistence predators, yes. You tracked prey over long distances, reading subtle environmental cues and behavioral patterns to predict movement. That's the theory, yeah. We're not fast or strong, but we're really good at following things until they collapse from exhaustion. And to do that effectively, you needed sophisticated pattern recognition, the ability to read tracks, interpret behavior, predict actions based on minimal data." Vera's armor pulsed with excitement, a rapid amber rhythm that Jake now recognized as intellectual enthusiasm. "Your brain is applying those same pattern-reading skills to our tactical displays. You are tracking our movement language the way your ancestors tracked prey." Jake considered that. "So when I watch your armor patterns, I'm basically hunting you." "In a sense, yes. You are reading us the way you would read tracks in dirt or behavior in prey animals. Which means," she shifted her armor through a complex sequence, "you might be capable of reading not just individual patterns, but multiple simultaneous sources." "Multiple." During combat, a Terk squad displays coordinated patterns. Individual warriors show their own status and intentions while also responding to command signals and adjacent unit positions. It creates a layered tactical picture that even experienced Terk must consciously work to process. She stood. "Let us test whether you can track multiple sources." 2 more Terk instructors entered the room. Their armor immediately lit up with patterns that Jake now recognized as greetings and status confirmations. "Track all 3 of us," Vera commanded. "Tell me what you see." All 3 Terk began moving through formation exercises, their armor blazing with coordinated patterns. Jake's eyes darted between them, trying to follow everything simultaneously. It should have been overwhelming. 3 separate light shows, each one complex and constantly shifting. But Jake's brain did something unexpected. It stopped trying to consciously parse individual patterns and instead let the whole thing wash over him as a unified field of information. He started seeing the relationships, how Vera's command signals rippled through to the other 2 instructors, how their response patterns acknowledged and adapted, how the entire group's displays synchronized into a cohesive tactical language. "You're planning a flanking maneuver," he said, surprised by his own certainty. "Vera's moving center to draw attention. The other 2 are splitting to establish crossfire positions. Threat level is moderate. This is training exercise intensity, not actual combat." The 3 Terks stopped moving. Their armor displays went completely still, all color draining away in what Jake realized was shock. How? One of the instructors started. He read the full tactical matrix, Vera said quietly. Not just individual patterns, the entire coordinated structure. Her armor blazed with colors Jake had never seen, complex cascading patterns that seemed to express something between awe and disbelief. Lieutenant Morrison, what you just did should not be possible for a being with no formal training in our systems. I just watched the patterns and they made sense. The way they interacted with each other created a bigger picture. Yes, that is exactly what they are supposed to do, but it takes Terk warriors months to learn to process multiple tactical sources simultaneously. You did it in your second training session. Vera moved closer. The question is whether this is unique to you, or representative of human potential generally. I'm not special, Jake protested. I'm just a guy who's apparently good at watching colored lights. But you are a human who processes alien tactical language faster than any species we have encountered. That is very special. Vera's armor settled into determined colors. We need to test you more extensively. Challenge your perception with deliberate complexity. See if you can distinguish real tactical signals from deception patterns. Deception patterns. We do not always display truth, Lieutenant Morrison. Sometimes our armor lies to confuse enemies or mislead competitors. A true tactical reader must distinguish honest signals from strategic misdirection. She gestured to the other instructors. Tomorrow, we begin advanced training. You will learn not just to read our patterns, but to understand when we are deliberately showing you false information. Jake's head was already spinning from basic pattern recognition. The idea of adding another layer of complexity made his brain hurt. How complicated does this get? Very. Vera's armor rippled with what might have been amusement, but I believe you can handle it. You possess something we did not expect from humans, adaptive perception that matches or exceeds species that have been reading our patterns for decades. She paused. You may revolutionize how we work with your kind, or you may simply be an interesting anomaly. Either way, I intend to find out which. Advanced training over the following weeks pushed Jake's abilities to their limits. Vera introduced deception patterns, tactical displays that looked legitimate but conveyed false information. Jake learned to spot tells, timing inconsistencies, color combinations that contradicted spatial references, pulse rhythms that didn't match stated threat levels. It was like learning to spot lies in body language. Except the body language was alien bioluminescent armor, and the lies were sophisticated enough to fool beings with decades of experience. You are improving, Vera said after a particularly brutal session, where she'd mixed truth and deception so thoroughly that Jake's success rate dropped to 60%. Most trained observers achieve 40% accuracy against advanced deception patterns. You are already exceeding that. Feels like failing, Jake muttered, reviewing the patterns he'd misread. Failure is achieving less than your potential. You are achieving beyond our expectations. She settled beside him, her armor shifting to contemplative colors. Tell me what you see when you look at me now. Jake looked at her, really looked, taking in the full display of her armor. You're relaxed but attentive. The base colors are calm, mostly blues and soft greens. But there's an amber thread running through the spine patterns that suggests you're thinking about something tactical. Not immediate threat, but planning or problem solving. He paused, and there's a warmth in the hip plating. I don't know what that means. Vera's armor rippled with surprise. Warmth is correct. That pattern indicates personal regard or affection. The fact that you perceived it is remarkable. Emotional subtleties are much harder to read than tactical information. So you actually like having me as a student? Or are you just displaying that to make me feel better? Both. I genuinely find this training rewarding, and I want you to know that. She shifted her armor deliberately, the warmth pattern intensifying. This is truth. Real emotional display, not deception. Jake studied the pattern, committing it to memory. How do I know you're not just teaching me a false baseline so you can manipulate me later? Vera's laughter chittered through the training room. Now you are thinking like a Terk, always questioning, always analyzing. Her armor blazed with approval. The answer is, you don't know. You must build trust through consistent observation and pattern matching over time. Just as humans learn to trust each other through repeated honest interaction. So alien relationships are basically the same as human ones. Trust built over time through consistent behavior. All relationships are built this way, Lieutenant Morrison. The mechanics may differ, but the foundation is universal. She stood, stretching her forearms in a gesture Jake recognized as satisfaction. Which brings me to the next challenge. There's more. Always more. Tomorrow you will attend a senior tactical briefing with Terk command staff. You will observe their pattern exchanges and report what you perceive. Vera's armor shifted to serious colors. This will be a true test. These are experienced warriors conducting actual strategic planning. Their patterns will be complex, layered, and potentially partially encrypted for security. You want me to spy on a military briefing. I want you to demonstrate your abilities to the command staff, who will decide whether you are an asset or a security risk. Her armor patterns turned grave. Some of our commanders are concerned about your ability to read our tactical language. If humans can learn our combat communication easily, it compromises centuries of tactical advantage. They want to assess whether you are unique or representative of broader human capability. Jake felt his stomach sink. So this is an evaluation to determine if I'm a threat. You are an evaluation to determine if you are an opportunity. Vera's armor softened. I believe you represent the latter, but I must prove it to those who believe secrecy is more valuable than alliance. Show them what you can do. Show them that human perception, combined with Terk tactics, creates something neither species could achieve alone. The weight of that settled on Jake's shoulders. He wasn't just learning to read, what if I fail? What if I can't read their patterns or I misinterpret something crucial? Then we learn your limits and adjust accordingly, but I do not think you will fail. Vera's armor blazed with confidence. You have exceeded every expectation so far. Tomorrow, you will prove to our commanders that humans deserve the respect we have been reluctant to grant. Jake spent that night reviewing everything he'd learned: pattern structures, color meanings, rhythm variations, spatial references, deception tells, emotional subtleties. His brain felt overstuffed with information, but when he closed his eyes, he could see Terk armor patterns dancing across his imagination, complex and beautiful, and making more sense than they had any right to. He thought about Vera's question that first day. Why do you keep looking at my butt? And how it had seemed like the end of his career. Instead, it had become the beginning of something unprecedented. Tomorrow he'd find out if that something was valuable enough to overcome military skepticism and species prejudice. Tomorrow he'd prove that sometimes the best way to bridge alien cultures was to stare at colored lights until they made sense. Or he'd prove he was just a weird guy who happened to be good at watching alien butts. Either way, it was going to be interesting. The command briefing room was designed to accommodate Terk proportions and sensibilities. High ceilings, open space, and walls that somehow amplified the bioluminescent displays every warrior produced. When Jake entered with Vera, the assembled commanders turned as one, their armor blazing with patterns he recognized as assessment and skepticism. "This is the human?" asked a particularly large Terk whose armor bore markings Jake had learned indicated senior rank. "The one who claims to read our tactical language." "He does not claim, Commander Jacques, he demonstrates." Vera gestured for Jake to stand forward. Lieutenant Morrison has progressed from basic pattern recognition to complex multi-source tactical reading in 4 weeks. He can distinguish deception patterns and perceive emotional subtleties. I believe he represents significant human potential for tactical integration. Or significant security risk, another commander said, armor pulsing with warning colors. If humans can decode our combat language, our tactical advantage is compromised. Only if we view them as enemies rather than allies, Vera countered. If Lieutenant Morrison's abilities are representative of human potential, we gain valuable partners who can truly integrate with our tactical systems, rather than merely coordinate adjacent to them. Jacques's armor shifted through contemplative patterns. We will test this human, observe our planning session, process what you can. At the conclusion, you will report your understanding. If your perception matches our tactical intentions, you prove your value. If you misread or misunderstand significantly, we must reconsider human participation in integrated operations. No pressure, Jake thought. The briefing began. 8 Terk commanders discussing what Jake gradually realized was a real tactical scenario, not training, but actual strategic planning for a potential security operation in a disputed sector. Their armor displays exploded with complexity. Individual patterns overlapping, command sequences rippling through the group, threat assessments and resource allocations, and timeline markers creating a visual symphony that made his previous training seem elementary. Jake stopped trying to consciously parse individual elements and let his brain do what it apparently did naturally, pattern recognition at a subconscious level. He watched the whole display as a unified field of information, tracking how patterns flowed between commanders, how certain color combinations triggered responses, how the entire system created a shared tactical picture without verbal language. Gradually, impossibly, it began making sense. Jacques was advocating for aggressive forward deployment. His armor patterns showed confidence in superior force application, minimal concern about logistics. The commander to his left, Jake didn't know her name, was expressing caution through amber warning patterns, showing projections of potential complications. A third commander displayed supply chain concerns through specific patterns Jake recognized as resource anxiety. The debate continued for 30 minutes. Jake tracked arguments, counter-arguments, compromises, and consensus building all through armor displays. When verbal language was used, it was sparse, mostly clarifying details or requesting specific data. The real conversation happened in light and color and rhythm. Finally, Jacques's armor blazed with decision-making authority. The other commanders' displays shifted to acknowledgement and coordination. They'd reached consensus. "Lieutenant Morrison," Jacques said, his armor still bright with command presence. "What did you observe?" Jake took a breath. "You were planning a security deployment to the Terminus sector." Commander Jacques advocated for aggressive force projection, suggesting 3 battle groups with heavy support elements. "Commander," he paused, not knowing names. The commander in the second position expressed concern about potential political complications and recommended a lighter footprint with emphasis on rapid response capability rather than sustained presence. Supply logistics were a concern raised by the commander in position 5, specifically regarding extended operation sustainability. He continued describing the debate as he'd perceived it through armor patterns, tracking how arguments evolved, where compromises formed, what the final consensus looked like. When he finished, the room was silent. Every Terk armor display had gone completely still. The shocked absence of color he'd learned meant profound surprise. Jacques spoke first. "You perceived accurately. Not just the general discussion, but specific positions, supporting arguments, and points of compromise." His armor shifted to colors Jake had never seen, something that might have been awe mixed with concern. "You were reading our strategic planning in real time, with accuracy that matches our own understanding of the exchange." "Is that bad?" Jake asked, suddenly worried he'd just proven he was a security risk. "It is unprecedented." The cautious commander from earlier moved closer, her armor cycling through analysis patterns. Even allied species with decades of training require translation assistance to follow Terk's strategic discussions. "You processed 8 simultaneous sources, and extracted coherent narrative without any technological aid. I just watched the patterns and tried to understand what they meant. You just demonstrated perception that fundamentally changes our assessment of human cognitive capabilities. Jacques's armor settled into decisive colors. Vera was correct. You are not a security risk. You are a bridge, a being capable of genuine integration with tactical systems rather than mere coordination. Another commander who'd been silent throughout the briefing finally spoke. If one human can achieve this level of perception, how many others might? If we train human forces to read our patterns, we gain allies who can operate within our tactical framework rather than parallel to it. Which requires teaching them our combat language, the cautious commander said, making our tactical systems transparent to beings we barely know. We barely know them because we have not tried to truly understand them, Vera interjected. Lieutenant Morrison proves that humans possess perceptual abilities we did not anticipate. They are not merely durable or innovative. They are adaptive in ways that complement our tactical precision. Jacques made a gesture with his forearms that Jake recognized as decision. We will proceed with expanded human integration. Lieutenant Morrison, you will lead a pilot program teaching selected human personnel to read tactical patterns. Instructor Vera will continue as your mentor and liaison to Terk Command. His armor pulsed with authority. You will prove whether your abilities are unique or representative of human potential. Either way, you have earned our respect. Jake felt something unclench in his chest. Thank you, Commander. I'll do my best to. You will do more than your best. You will create a bridge between our species that has not existed before. Jacques's armor softened slightly. And Lieutenant, when you report this to your superiors, you may want to phrase the origin of your training more diplomatically than I was staring at my instructor's butt. The room filled with Terk laughter, armor displays blazing with amusement, and Jake felt his face burn even as he smiled. Some things were universal across species, including never letting you live down embarrassing moments. 3 months later, Jake stood before a classroom of 15 human officers who'd been selected for pattern reading aptitude. Vera stood beside him, her armor displaying supportive colors that he could now read as easily as human facial expressions. Pattern reading is not translation, Jake explained, pulling up a display showing Terk armor configurations. It's perception. Your brain already processes vast amounts of nonverbal information from human body language. We're training it to process similar information from Terk bioluminescent displays. One of the students raised a hand. Is it true you learned this by accidentally staring at instructor Vera during formation training? Jake sighed. That story had spread through both human and Terk forces with depressing speed. I was trying to predict her movements by watching her armor patterns. I didn't realize what I was doing had cultural or tactical significance. He thought he was being inappropriate, Vera added, her armor rippling with amusement. Instead, he was demonstrating perceptual abilities that have since been documented in approximately 40% of tested humans. You all possess latent pattern reading capability. We are here to develop it. The training session proceeded. Jake walked the students through basic patterns while Vera demonstrated on her armor. Some picked it up quickly. Others struggled with the fundamental shift in perception required. But every single student showed some level of aptitude, proof that Jake wasn't unique, just early. During a break, Vera pulled him aside. You have become an excellent teacher. I'm just explaining what you taught me. You are translating between species, taking tactical concepts and presenting them in ways human minds can process. That is not merely repetition, it is bridge building. Her armor shifted to colors Jake recognized as pride. You have created something neither species could have developed alone. A hybrid understanding that combines Terk precision with human adaptability. We make a good team, Jake said. Yes, we do. Vera's armor displayed that warmth pattern Jake had learned meant personal regard. When I asked why you were looking at my butt, I was testing whether you would panic or explain. Most beings panic when confronted with perceived social violation. You explained your reasoning, even while embarrassed. That told me you were worth teaching. So the whole thing was a test. The whole thing was an observation. I noticed you tracking my patterns and wanted to see how you would respond when challenged. Her armor pulsed with satisfaction. You responded with honesty and curiosity. Those are the foundations of genuine cross-species understanding. Jake thought about that, about how an embarrassing moment had become an opportunity, because he'd been too confused to lie and too curious to stop trying to understand alien communication. "I'm glad I stared at your butt," he said, then immediately regretted the phrasing. Vera's laughter chittered through the room. "I am glad you did as well, Lieutenant Morrison. Your inappropriate observation has become the foundation for a revolution in human-Terk cooperation." 6 months after that first embarrassing confrontation, Jake was invited to address a joint session of human and Terk command staff. He stood before assembled military leadership from both species and explained how pattern reading training had expanded to over 200 human personnel, with success rates exceeding all projections. "What began as a misunderstanding about where I was looking during training has become a bridge between our species," Jake said, displaying data on integration improvements. Human forces trained in Terk pattern reading show 40% better coordination in joint operations. Response times improve. Communication errors decrease. We're not just working alongside Terk warriors, we're working within their tactical framework. Jacques stood, his armor blazing with approval. "Lieutenant Morrison has proven that humans possess capabilities we did not anticipate. More importantly, he has demonstrated that genuine alliance requires more than treaties and coordination protocols. It requires beings willing to learn alien systems so thoroughly they become fluent in them. It requires beings willing to stare at things they don't understand until they make sense," Jake added, getting laughter from both species. "Even when that means staring at places that might be culturally awkward." Vera's armor rippled with amusement. Especially then, discomfort often precedes understanding. The session concluded with formal recognition of the pattern reading program and expansion approval. Jake was promoted and assigned permanent liaison duty with Terk tactical integration. Vera received commendation for her mentorship and vision in recognizing human potential. Afterward, they stood together in the observation deck, watching the stars beyond the Astralis complex. "You changed both our species," Vera said quietly. "You proved that humans can perceive and adapt in ways we thought impossible. And you did it by being exactly yourself, curious, persistent, willing to look foolish if it meant learning something new. I just wanted to understand why the colored lights moved the way they did. You wanted to understand. That is the beginning of all progress." Her armor shifted to contemplative colors. "I have trained many warriors, Lieutenant Morrison. You are the first I would call a true bridge between worlds." Jake looked at her armor, reading the patterns as easily as he'd read human expressions his entire life. Pride, satisfaction, genuine affection mixed with professional respect. And underneath it all, that warmth pattern that meant she valued him not just as a student or tool, but as a person. "Thank you," he said, "for teaching me, for believing I could learn when it should have been impossible, for making that first embarrassing moment into something meaningful. Thank you for being brave enough to keep looking when you could have looked away, for learning our language when you could have remained ignorant, for proving that the distance between species is smaller than fear suggests." Vera's armor blazed with colors Jake had learned meant deep emotional truth. "You asked why I keep displaying warmth patterns when I look at you. This is why. You remind me that understanding is always possible if both parties are willing to try, even when trying means staring at things that make you uncomfortable. I'm never going to live down the butt staring thing, am I? Never." It is now part of Alliance history. The human who revolutionized cross-species cooperation by looking at his instructor's armor plating and refusing to stop until he understood what he was seeing. Her laughter filled the observation deck. You should be proud. Most beings' legacies are built on warfare or discovery. Yours is built on being curious about alien backsides. Jake laughed despite himself. When you put it that way, it sounds almost dignified. It is dignified. Curiosity is always dignified, especially when it leads to understanding. Vera's armor settled into peaceful colors. Come. We have a new batch of students arriving tomorrow. More humans who will learn to read our patterns and build bridges we did not know we needed. They left the observation deck together. Human and Terk, teacher and student, friends who'd found understanding in the most unlikely place. Colored lights on alien armor that one confused lieutenant couldn't stop staring at. Behind them, the stars watched in silence, indifferent witnesses to the small miracles of connection that sometimes began with the simplest, most embarrassing questions. Why do you keep looking at my butt, human? And the answer that changed everything. Because I'm trying to understand